And last year, because they basically shut him down, he went months and months and months with no income. He basically had to file bankruptcy. And through a lot of negotiation, a lot of things, he was able to buy it back with the help of some other, the bank and Small Business Association and different things. And he was supposed to have closed last week. I ran into him the day after they were supposed to have closed, and I said, "Congratulations, it's all yours now, lock, stock, and barrel." And he said, "Well, we got a major hiccup the day we were supposed to close. Something came up, and I haven't talked to him to see if they've worked it out or not." The alternative is a logistical warehouse wants to buy it. And if you know anything about logistics and warehousing, there would be trucks constantly, big tractor trailers coming down, loading, leaving, coming down, loading, leaving. And we certainly do not want that. So, like I say, I was going to try to talk to him this week, but I usually catch him out. Pray that we don't get a warehouse, because that would be traffic like we have never imagined before. I asked him what the hiccup was, and it's a technicality that a normal person wouldn't even blink twice at. But when you're dealing with banks and things, they super duper telescopic, microscopic analyze everything. So just pray that that goes through and that Perry gets to keep it. Prayer breakfast is Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Saturday morning here, 9 o'clock. And I talked to the lady yesterday from Lifeline. They have upped our limit now because we were filling up. They have upped it. We now have another 8 or 10 openings. If you haven't got in yet. And she said that they would have to send another person down. But if we fill up, they can up it another 10. So, but they would have to send someone else down. I still have one discount coupon left. And I don't know. Somebody surely will use it. But that is, if you haven't signed up, they upped our limit. So we now have 8 or 10, I think. So, keep that in the back of your mind. Honey, if you will, you're not honey, but you'll do. Oh, I would say something, but. Oh, wow. Just make sure I got one, because I forgot. I'm trying to cut my notes a little shorter so that we get out on time, or at least close to time. Yeah, don't forget to give Trish one in the nursery. It shouldn't be 100. As I said in the beginning, Jude has some interesting information as well as warnings and all kinds of other wonderful things in it. And so I'm trying not to rush through it. Tonight we will bring up a couple of questions that I thought were very interesting, very challenging, and we'll see how many of you know when we get to that point. We looked last week at the intrusion of false teachers, preachers, false heretics, people who were trying to destroy the church by preaching false doctrine, how they crept into the church. They were like wolves in sheep's clothing. They looked great until you really examined them. And then when you really examine them, you find out what they are. They are ungodly men, which we'll see probably more next week. They're ungodly men who use grace as an excuse to sin. And boy, do we see that going on today in a lot of places. Verses 5 through 7, which is where we're going to try to cover, deals with some characteristics of these guys and the doom, the ultimate doom of these guys. In verse 5, 6, and 7, he's showing that God punishes sin. You could take those three verses and sum up, he's teaching God punishes sin. No matter who you are, what you are, or how you behave, God punishes sin. In verse 5, I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, you apparently had forgotten it, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. Israel was God's chosen people. They were God's covenant people. God made a covenant with Abraham, then renewed it with Isaac, and renewed it again with Jacob. You are my people. I give you. In fact, I was reading this week, if you really look at a map, and I thought about getting one, but then I'm not sure where my maps are, to be honest. I could probably find them. But if you take the land that God gave to the nation of Israel, there in Joshua primarily, you'll notice that the land of Israel actually goes from way down here at the Red Sea, just outside of Egypt, all the way up and over to the great river Euphrates. How much of that land does Israel have today? Yeah, maybe 1%, 2% out of all the land that God gave them. But it's God gave that to them, made a covenant with them, sent Moses down into Egypt, destroyed Egypt, led them out with a high hand, led them across the Red Sea, led them out into the desert, saved them from the land of Egypt. And then when they sinned, even though they were his chosen people, his covenant people, he destroyed those who did not believe him. Israel represents those that belong to God. Christians, God's chosen people, everyone who is saved was chosen by God. But even though we were chosen by God, delivered from sin by God, saved by God, God can and will ultimately, he destroyed the children of Israel. And I wonder how many people have died. And I know I can't judge 100%, but you can look at the evidence and make some pretty good assumptions. How many people have died, what we would say prematurely, which is not 100% true because you can't die prematurely, but how many people have died what we would call prematurely because they rejected God, rejected God's word, and rejected and refused to serve God? Verse 6, he deals with the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitations. He hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Now, don't read your notes. Just look at me for a minute. Don't read your notes. How many sets of angels do we know about in the Bible? How many sets of angels or types of angels? Just angels. Just angels. Okay. Casey says 2. Sonny says 3. What's everybody else say? Do what? Oh, okay. Actually, there are three groups of angels, and they're listed here, or at least one of them are listed here. The others are listed elsewhere. We know there is a group of angels, Isaiah chapter 6, they're called seraphims. And over in Revelation, we see a multitude of angels and seraphims who worship God. In Isaiah, it's holy, holy, holy. The angels are sent from God to be our messengers. They are our caretakers. Angels are, and I don't like the term, but we do have a guardian angel that watches over us. We have angels that protect us even when we don't know about it. Those are the good angels that worship God, that serve His people. Then there's the angels that fell with Satan, who were cast out of heaven. A third of the angels were cast out of heaven, and they are roaming loose upon the earth today under Satan's direction. It's the demons that torture us. It's the demons that tempt us. It's the demons that that we have so much trouble with today. They fell with Satan, and today they tempt, test, and torment, especially God's people. They're not the devil, but they work under the devil, with the devil, for the devil, to try to make our life as miserable as possible. Then there's these sets of this set of angels, which are reserved in everlasting chains. They're not roaming the earth. They're not working under Satan. They're not, running around tempting us and testing us, and like the demon-possessed man in the tombs. These demons, these angels, are in everlasting chains under darkness. So we got the good angels, the demonic angels, which are running the earth, and then these angels. And why these angels were immediately put in chains and the others weren't, we would have to simply speculate. Notice these angels left their first estate. When God created angels, what were they like? And I don't mean 6 wings and, floating around like that. When God created angels, what were they like? One word would do it. I had perfect, and I agree, I had perfect in my notes, and I changed it because sinless, I thought sinless was a better word. They had not sinned, just as Adam and Eve had not sinned. But they were perfect. They were very good. They were part of God's original creation. They were involved at the end of day 6, when God saw everything that He had created, the universe, all the universes out there, all the stars, all the planets. He saw the earth, all the trees, all the animals. He saw the angels, which were created in one of those 6 days, and everything was very good. But these angels left their first estate. They kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. They left that state of sinlessness that they once enjoyed. They left that, and with these angels, we're not told exactly why. We know Satan tried to take over. Satan tried to become God. Satan tried to dethrone God, and the angels that fought with him. All we know about these angels is that they did not keep their first estate. They did not keep that state of sinlessness in which they were created, and they are reserved in everlasting change until the judgment of the great day. Now, I get ahead of my notes sometime. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul writing to the church at Corinth. That's at the very bottom of page 6. Paul writing to the church at Corinth. They were suing each other, taking each other to court. This was all within the church. And I'll throw a little side note in here. This is Christians within the church. Those to whom the church has authority over. This is not talking about, punishing the evildoers. This is not talking about those in the world. This is, in 1 Corinthians 13, he's talking to Christians in the church at Corinth. And he tells them, you ought to be willing to suffer loss. But then he comes down to verse 3 and he said, know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? That phrase, we shall judge angels. Jude said that they're reserved unto the judgment of the great day. Some wonder, and this is wonder, speculate, if Paul and Jude are talking about one and the same thing. We, for whatever, however, whenever, wherever, we, according to Paul, are going to judge angels. These angels are reserved unto the judgment of the great day. How will that take place? How will Paul take place? When, where, and how will we, who are members of the church, how will we judge angels? That's one of those things we will probably never know in this life. I was reading a book, I guess I read that one last week. And it was talking about one of the things preachers often fail is in admitting we don't know everything. He said many preachers have been brought down because they think they have to know everything. And it was reassuring that, you know what? God's the only one that knows everything. So I don't know when, where, and how we're going to judge angels. And I don't know if it'll be these angels or the ones that are roaming throughout the earth. But we are going to judge angels. And these angels are reserved unto the judgment. So maybe we'll find out a whole lot more. In verse 7, we find out about Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, in reading this, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, so it wasn't just Sodom and Gomorrah, there were many other cities around them that were doing the same thing. In like manner to the angels that kept not their first estate, in like angels that went directly against God, gave up everything God had made, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication. I can remember, I can remember in college, especially college, where it was ironclad, open shut, door locked, no ifs, no room for questioning. This is the answer. I will not have any other answers. This is the only acceptable answer. Fornication is, how was it? It's been so long ago. Thou shalt not commit adultery is among married people. Fornication is only among unmarried people. Were you taught that growing up? Adultery was between two people who were married but not to each other. And fornication was between two people who were not married at all. Okay. Well, that worked fine until I got out and began studying. The word fornication and adultery, occasionally, rare, but occasionally, they are used almost synonymously. But in my understanding, in looking at adultery through the books of Moses, looking at adultery in the New Testament, looking at adultery in Paul's writings and different things. Adultery is any kind of sexual behavior outside of husband and wife, married to each other together. Adultery is any sexual sin. The Ten Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery is, if you read on, it's bestiality, it's homosexuality, it's, the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery, includes a wide range of things. Fornication, on the other hand, in most instances, seems to be an ongoing thing. It's not just like, oh, we were out on a date, we got carried away, we sinned, it never happened again. That would be adultery because that was, a sin outside of marriage to each other. Fornication is used in a great multitude of ways. It's used, but it's almost always here. They gave themselves to fornication. In other words, homosexuality was rampant, but it wasn't just homosexuality. They were loose as a goose in all of their morals. They were, with anybody and everybody was doing it with anybody and everybody was doing everything that God said don't do. They gave themselves over to fornication, which was an ongoing thing. It wasn't a simple, I sinned, I repent. This was, they gave themselves continually, repetitively, over and over. This was a way of life to them. And then on top of that, going after strange flesh. Strange flesh. Well, if you go back to Numbers and I believe it's Numbers and Deuteronomy, I think, are the two biggest ones. Strange flesh would include bestiality. That's strange flesh. Strange flesh would, I'm not even going to get into some of these because we do have mixed company here, but strange flesh would be anything other than the God-given husband married to his wife, husband and wife married to each other, and their relationship. Strange flesh would be anything other than that which God created with Adam and Eve. We usually think of it, and in this case it seems to be the predominant thing, that strange flesh includes homosexuality. Now, we've got a few extra minutes, so I'm going to turn back to Romans. I debated putting it in your notes, but I was afraid I wouldn't have time, but we do. Romans chapter 1, I believe it is. Romans chapter 1, beginning in verse 24. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Go back to Moses dishonoring their own bodies. He forbids any kind of animal in a relationship. He includes a wide variety of things. In verse 26, God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, that which is strange. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. God designed man and wife perfectly to match up with each other in a natural way. Any other thing is against nature, and it's strange. It's weird. I was reading a magazine, I believe it was Monday, And it was talking about how that the LGBTQ, they've added a couple of letters, many of them just shortened it LGBTQ plus, and that plus has got 30-something other things, that they are strong-arming almost every company, every TV station in America. And I have not noticed it since I read it, but I'm going to start noticing almost every modern TV show has at least one lesbian, homosexual in the show. Since I read that, I haven't really watched it, but they are strong-arming companies so that, and what was it? Disney, the Disney cartoons, and what's the Big Bird and all of those. Sesame Street now has homosexuals on Sesame Street. They are inundating our kids in cartoons because they're strong-arming the companies, and Christians are not doing much of anything. Maybe so often ought to be so soon. All right. What do you see in America today? It won't clip on my belt. Do we not see immorality on every hand? Half the couples, right around 51, 52% of couples living together today are not married. Couples, men, don't think anything about being unfaithful to their wives. Women don't think anything about being unfaithful to their husbands. We are committing sins that there's a move on, and I can't remember if it was California or almost had to be California. They're the beginning of all kinds of immorality. Well, one state is trying to legalize prostitution. And I see it. If it's not California, I'll be shocked, because they're the ones they're trying to legalize prostitution. Imagine what that's going to do to society. There was a move a couple of years ago to legalize pedophilia. Everybody know what that is, I'm sure. You know, hey, if I'm 69 years old and I want to get a 8-year-old boy and go out here and mess with him, it would be perfectly legal if pedophilia was legalized. Imagine the generation that grows up with that. Are we much better today than Sodom and Gomorrah? Homosexuality, it's estimated that it used to be 3%, but now they raised it to roughly 5% of the population is homosexual. But that 5% determines the other 95% and what we can and cannot do. Sodom and Gomorrah were sent straight to hell because of their sin. God did allow them to go deeper and deeper and deeper into sin, but God eventually dealt with them and killed him. Now, I got a question, and I don't want to get into a discussion. Just keep it really, really short and simple. Some of you can probably answer yes or no. Is homosexuality inherited? And is it uncontrollable? I said one word. Which one of you said that? You? We hear so much today. So much today. I was born that way. I agree. And it's when God created Adam and Eve, what was the one commandment he gave them? Multiply, replenish the earth. The command today is husband and wife, produce godly children. Godly husband, godly wife, produce godly children who will then raise up, marry a godly spouse, have godly children. But procreation was part of the command when God created Adam and Eve. How on earth can two homosexuals procreate? Although I opened up, wasn't one of my regular magazines, and I was just thumbing through it, and big bold headlines, man gives birth. Well, obviously that got my attention, but when you went on and read the article, it was a woman who wanted to transgender into a man, but in the process got pregnant. She was still had all the organs, all the plumbing of a woman, and she got pregnant as a woman. But the headlines, man gives birth. Part of marriage, unless God does intervene, which he does in cases, but one purpose of marriage is to raise godly children, to continue on with the heritage of, fathers train your children, who train their children, who train their children. Marriage certainly has its enjoyments. Marriage certainly has its benefits. But marriage is not strictly about feeling good with myself. It's not about just feeling good. It's about commitment. It's about God's example. It's about bearing children, at least making an effort. No, there's no such thing. In fact, I was reading a few weeks ago, and if I mentioned it, forgive me. A very famous scientist, doctor, came out and wrote an article in one of the major medical journals that you cannot know when a baby is born, if it's male or female, until they reach 8, 10, 12 years of age. Then they decide if they want to be, but you cannot tell at birth if it's male or female. And somebody replied back, you need glasses or you need to open your eyes because it's very, very obvious at birth. Is homosexuality inherited? No. Is it uncontrollable? I didn't understand why at the time. I found out later. Years ago, had a young man stop by our house, and he was trying to sell something. I don't even remember what he was selling. So I wanted to be nice and at least let him give his sales pitch. So he came in and gave his sales pitch. I didn't buy anything, but we started talking, and he said, do you believe, he knew I was a preacher by that point, he said, do you believe that you cannot help being a homosexual? And I said, and the question really caught me off guard. I said, I think some people are perhaps tempted in that direction more than others. But I said, it's a temptation like any other temptation. And you have to resist it. Adultery is a temptation, but you don't give in to it. It's a temptation, but you resist it just like you would any other temptation. And we went on and talked, and I got the impression toward the end that he was having strong desires toward the same sex. And I said, you have to fight those desires just as much as anyone else has to fight any other desire. Some people have trouble with gambling. They have to fight it. Some people have trouble with all kinds of things. Homosexuality is a sin for which some people are tempted, but it is sin, and you have to fight it just like adultery, just like anger, just like any other sin. So no, it is not uncontrollable. You can control it just like any other sin has to be controlled. Now, these three examples show us, regardless of nationality, regardless of status, angels, regardless of immorality, God punishes sin. You may get by with it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. David got by with adultery for quite some time. We know he got by for 9 months. We know the baby was had already got some age on it when Nathan came in and said the baby will die. So it had been at least a year that David got by, but eventually God convicted him, and David repented, and because his repentance was genuine, God said, I'm not going to kill you. Thou shalt not die, which was the normal punishment. God spared him, but God said, because you've done this thing, you're going to reap this sin fourfold. And if you study the life of David from that point forward, he had 4 major events in his life that were direct results of his sin with Bathsheba and his killing of Uriah. All right, I'm going to pause there. We'll pick up verse 8 and 10 because that actually is a better stopping point anyway. All right, am I still working, Sonny? Yes, sir. Dun, 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 dun. That's what I said Sunday. A Christian is capable of any sin that anybody else is capable of. The sinful nature is inherited. But the specific sin, there's nothing in me that makes me become homosexual? Oh, that's fine. But our sinful nature is inherited, but that nature does not express itself in every capable sin. Now, you're talking about inherited sin. I'm talking about inherited nature. You know, that's a good word. I am not genetically made a homosexual. Thank you for that excellent word, dear. Does that make sense? In fact, homosexuality for me, I find to be downright repulsive. But I've got other things that, boy, I struggle with. We have an inherited sinful nature. There's no denying that. Assuming you have any left, right? Who said you're getting it anyway? Yeah, I think, and this is where to me it makes sense. I draw a distinction, I draw a distinction between inherited sinful nature and inherited specific sin. I was not born a homosexual. I was born a sinner, but I wasn't born a homosexual. I was born capable. I control it, but if I was born homosexual, then I wouldn't be able to control it any more than I can control being a boy, man. Do what? Yeah, I think we believe the same thing. I think it's just a matter of semantics. Yeah, I sin because am I capable of homosexuality? In the wrong place, at the wrong time, under the wrong circumstances? And yeah, especially if I'm backslidden, I'm capable, but I'm not. My nature doesn't make me become a homosexual. I do have a choice, and it's a choice that I choose because I have a sinful nature. I think we're on the same. We're in the same ballpark, and I think we're both on. Yeah. I inherited a sinful nature which is capable of any sin, but I did not inherit homosexuality. Which goes back to environment, I think, plays a big role in how we turn out. Things, and I've said this, things my dad taught me, I cannot forget. I cannot forget. Things, in fact, I did something the other day and somebody said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "I don't know. My dad taught me to do it. I don't know why. My dad taught me." But I think we agree It's just, do I inherit homosexuality or a sinful nature that's capable of homosexuality? I'm capable of anything, but my genetics don't force me to become something. I'm capable of adultery, but God has spared me for 69 years, and I've never given in to it, even though wrong place, wrong time, wrong circumstance, backslidden condition, I could fall as easy as anybody could. Now, when I get to be as bad as Joe Biden, somebody please lock me up. Did you hear that in the interest of equality, he's now going around sniffing men's hair as well? All right. With that, you'll be bald someday. Now, Aaron, our oldest, used to have as much hair as you do. And then, I don't know, within a couple of years, he's as bald as I am. So, any who's he what. All right. Charles, would you dismiss us, please?